Hello, everyone, and welcome on behalf of Dallas College and the sustainability team. My name is Faye Davis, so let's get started. Today's session is titled Bridging the Gap from Prison to Promise, and our speaker is Richard Miles. And here's his story. On February 15th, 2012, the Texas highest state court, the Court of Criminal Appeals, found Richard Miles factually innocent of a murder and attempted murder for which he had been incarcerated 15 years but had nothing to do with. He was released from prison on October 10th, 2009, but the fight was far from over. Richard Miles founded Miles of Freedom, a Dallas nonprofit that seeks to deal with the entire structure of reentry when it comes to the previously incarcerated individual coming home. Their mission is to equip, empower, and employ individuals returning home from prison and provide support and assistance for families and communities impacted by incarceration. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today. Please take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Faye Davis, for this opportunity. Everybody that's zooming in now, the awesome behind-the-scene team, as Ms. Davis brought up, Ms. Dela Cruz, Mr. Sanchez, just everybody, Ms. Sonia Ford. I'm just super excited to be here and to just begin this conversation about bridging the gap from prison to promise, and more particularly about talking about the sustainability of our institution when we are looking at our criminal legal system. Now, I do refer to our system as a criminal legal system because sometimes we have seen situations where justice is void of the process. And while we all aspire to have a criminal justice system where justice is always that focal lens, we do understand that we are moving towards that type of system. I believe that we do have legal procedures and processes in place, but the actual implementation of justice from beginning to end, whether that is on the victim's end or on the person that is suspected of a crime, justice sometimes falls short. And so we want to talk about this in the context of our criminal legal system. Now, as you heard in the beginning by the presentation with Ms. Faye, my name is Richard Miles, and at the age of 19, I was wrongfully arrested for a murder and attempted murder that I had no knowledge of. You can really go into more depths about my case if you read in the law books, where it's actually a case citing, Ex parte Richard Miles. It's in the Southwest 3rd edition of our criminal law books. And I believe it's on about page 600. But you can kind of go into depths about what happened in my case. That night when I was arrested, I was 19 years old, and I really had never been in any type of trouble with the police or authorities. You know, I grew up in a very spiritually guided, close-knit family. I have two younger brothers, one older sister. My dad was a minister. My mom was a school teacher. So education and family was pretty much the central key elements of my upbringing. When I was arrested the night of May 15, 1994, I remember one of the things that was reoccurring in my mind that I would hear from my dad was, "The truth shall set you free." And I stood on that. I told the truth during the interrogation with the police officers, the full 17 months of me being in the county jail, and even in my 6-day jury trial. The truth was always made known, and everybody that supported me and knew the truth came out, and they was a part of me pushing to prove my innocence. Needless to say, because of multiple factors, I was found guilty after that 6-day jury trial and sentenced to a total of 60 years in the Texas Department of Corrections. Now, that was 40 years for the murder that I was accused of and 20 years for the attempted murder that I was accused of. When I actually signed the paperwork with the courts, they told me that I would actually have to do a total of 20 years within our prison system before I was eligible for parole. Now, understanding that I had just really turned 20 years old because I went to jury trial in August of 1995, and my birthday is April, my birthday gift walking into the Texas prison system was one that I will never forget. I want to pose to you the movie Shawshank Redemption. If you've ever seen that movie, I think that's one of the best written movies that captures not only the mindset of individuals that are incarcerated, but also the tragedies that happen within and the potential tragedies that can happen post-incarceration without proper resources. But as we get into this conversation, what I want to do is I want to take my life experience and I want to talk about my experience, particularly in the prison system, and how my experience parallels with other historical situations within America. And it should also give us a need and a blueprint of what we need to do moving forward when we're talking about assisting individuals that are incarcerated. Or if you are a student that wants to be in the prison reform space, then I think this conversation will give you an idea of the mindset of individuals incarcerated and the system in which those individuals are placed in. And so one of the first things that I do want to highlight is the obvious fact that our criminal justice system and our prison system, particularly in the southern states, and I'll get into those particular states later on, but particularly in the southern states, when we look at the setup of our prison systems, we understand that the 13th Amendment still allows individuals to be placed in a space of slavery. Now, what I want to do is I want to break down the characteristics of slavery, and then I'm going to break down the characteristics of our Texas Department of Corrections. And I want to parallel those things. And then at the end, I want to give some anecdotal concepts of how we can move forward once we've understood what we're dealing with. And so the first thing is we want to understand that the 13th Amendment states neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. The key part that hit me so many years ago when I was incarcerated was the word except. When I went to prison as an innocent person, it was hard for me to understand how our courtroom convicted an innocent person. But within my 15 years of being on Copier Unit, which is one of the largest prisons in Texas, housing over 5,000 men, I encountered about 30 other men that were also wrongfully incarcerated. Benjamin Spencer, Christopher Scott, Andre Courage, Ricky Wyatt, all of us were wrongfully incarcerated on the same unit, which showed me that this was a bigger issue and greater than my particular situation. But I understood the fact that we needed to understand the captor. If you ever saw those movies where somebody was kidnapped by someone and if they're talking to somebody that's trying to help them escape, they're telling them to learn as much as you can about the person that has you captive. So that way you can understand them and then be able to deal with the situation that you're in until help can come for you. And so I began to study the history of the prison system, particularly as it related to Texas. First thing I want you to understand, when you're talking about the prison system, we have two types. You have the federal prison system and you have the state prison system. A lot of times when you hear laws that come from the government that talks about changing our system within the prisons, that change does not get to the state level. It may impact the federal level, Second Chance Act, but it doesn't really deal with the state prisons. The state prisons operate on a totally different monetary factor, a totally different rules and regulations. It is totally separate. And I spent all of my time within the state and within the state prison system. Now, when you look at our prison system, I want to first go back to the characteristics of slavery. And I want to call these things out, and then I want to take a journey of my life as I was incarcerated. And I want to connect these two, and then, as I said earlier, come with some type of dialogue moving forward that we can all build upon for a more justified and just feel system. So when you think about the characteristics of slavery, the first thing is an individual was taken and they were used for a source of labor. Their identity, who they were, their culture, everything was pretty much taken away from them. And the whole and sole purpose for that individual was labor, and more particularly free labor. The slavery system also had no type of stable family structure. You saw where families were actually taken apart. The husband may have been taken away, the children, the mother, some type of dynamic was fractured or structured to not fully be together because of slavery. Very little privacy. We've seen the movies where you had the rooms and you had 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 people in one room. The shows of the boats and how they move people across, the very little sense of privacy. Prohibited by law to learn to read and write. It was not legal for an individual that was considered as a slave to know how to read or write for multiple reasons. Slaves received tokens. They didn't really receive money. They received things that incentivized work efforts, but not really gave them any type of financial standing or any type of financial backing. The rebellious was punished, and there was a social hierarchy that was in place that kept this system together. And that hierarchy was the individuals that were enslaved. Their jobs pretty much kind of kept everyone separate. You had the individuals that worked in the house. You had these more skilled individuals. And then you had the individuals that worked in the fields. And lastly, there was no external specialized mental or medical assistance for anybody that was actually considered as a person that was a slave. Now, those type of characteristics, I actually found them when I looked up in the Britannica dictionary, just finding out characteristics of slavery. And I want to talk to you about my personal situation incarcerated. The first unit I got to was Cofield unit. 5,000 people on this unit. I oftentimes say Richard Ray Miles Jr. died May 15, 1994. Because the person that I aspired to be, going to Skyline High School and getting ready to go to TSTC in Waco, that person died the night the handcuffs was placed on me. After being given 60 years in the Texas Department of Corrections, I'm then sent to Cofield unit, and for the first 5 years, my job task was working in the field force. Working in the field force, whether that was picking agriculture, from sweet potatoes to watermelon to, if you was on the right unit in the South, cotton, all of this tedious manual labor was imposed upon individuals the day that they walked into the prison system. You automatically knew that your ideas, your thoughts was of no interest to the system in which you was placed in. The only interest that the system had was the labor. Secondly, one of the things that I encountered while I was in prison was you could get transferred from unit to unit. You could get moved from job to job. That just instability of not really having a place to call your home keeps a person not really comfortable mentally and physically. One of the things that you can consider when I was speaking about earlier with slavery was the disassociation from family. The average prison in Texas or in the southern states is about 2.5 hours from the city. And so families that don't have the financial, families that are handicapped, families that are getting older, they don't have the capacity to travel the highways to visit their loved ones. And so you have this automatic disconnect once that person has been given a prison sentence. And then you have the institutions that provide communications via phone, but sometimes the phone calls are so expensive that only letter writing is the most financially reasonable tool to stay in contact with your family. Lack of privacy. When I first walked into prison, they took me to this shower area, and I'm 20 years old, and it's about 200 men in the open space with these shower heads that was hanging out of the ceiling, and we was all showering in this one compact room, and it immediately showed me that I had no privacy anymore. Not only physical privacy from a point of myself, but even mental privacy, to be able to understand still who I was and what I wanted to do and how could I get out of this situation of being in prison. Privacy also crept in when you could walk down the hallway to chow, and an occasional officer will see you and just ask you to be stripped down for the sake of security. And so there was never any privacy within prison, and a person immediately saw that there was not one time when you could be alone unless you chose to be in segregation. And that's in a cell by yourself for 23 hours a day, which, as we know, is not mentally good for individuals that are incarcerated. I spoke of earlier the inability for individuals that were slaves to know how to read or be able to learn how to read. Very early when I got incarcerated, I was able to get my associate's degree from Trinity Valley Community College. Shortly after that, a major budget cut hit the prison system, and the accessibility for higher education and going to college was taken away. And so now the average person that goes to prison, the only thing that they'll probably be able to get is a GED. And if they're on the unit that provides some vocational training, hopefully the vocational training can be transferred out here. A lot of times the vocational training is behind the 8 ball and it's really not up to speeds with technology that plays a part in today's society. One of the other things that I look at when I look at my time that I did in prison, and all of this is building up to why we need individuals on this side of the playing field to help people impacted by incarceration, and what is the need for miles of freedom. Slaves received tokens of favor. I think one of the interesting dynamics of our prison system is there is only 8 prisons, 8 states that do not pay the individuals that are incarcerated. I worked in a system for 15 years for a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day, and I was never paid for the work that I did. Never caught a case, and I was also never paid. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Texas are the states that do not pay the individuals that are incarcerated for their work. Yet and still, we can take a person and place them in this institution for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, let them go with a $50 check that's given from the state of Texas, and we want them and expect them to succeed. That's virtually impossible because that person does not have any resources to remotely even think about sustainability after being in an institution where you were not given value, where you were not treated as value. I also looked up the highest paid prison, the highest paid state that pays their individuals incarcerated, and it was actually Kansas, and that was at $3. And it was probably $3 an hour or potentially $3 a day. But this is not back in the 40s or 50s. This is in 2022, where we still are dealing with these situations. The social hierarchy. Interestingly, as I said earlier, for the first 5 years on the Texas prison system, I worked in the field force. Now, have you seen any of the shows where individuals had on all white and they were cutting grass with some Aggies, or they call them grubbing hoes, Aggies or garden hose? That was my job. I mean, we would get on the trailer early in the morning. The trailer will be pulled by a tractor. It's probably about 15 to 20 trailers connected to the back of a tractor, and about 20 to 30 men on each trailer, right? And so we're headed to this field, and our task is either picking agriculture, whatever grows out there, or cutting grass with these tools that they give us. The way that you get out of the fields is the officer or the boss that's on the horse, that's your boss that's over the squad, has to consider you as a good worker. And if that person considers you as a good worker, then you could potentially get a job in the kitchen. And so you would move from working in the fields to being able to work in the kitchen. That's exactly what I did. About the 6th year of being out in the fields, the particular officer that was over me, seeing that I was a good worker, and gave me an opportunity to work in the kitchen. And once I got to the kitchen, I was able to get better jobs, working in the infirmary, working visitation. And so I was able to make it up the quote unquote hierarchy of labor or status for an individual that's actually incarcerated. But there is a disconnect because individuals that work in the fields, they can't really connect with the individuals that work in the building because you don't even stay in the same kind of like areas. And so you see that particular fracture or structure set up within the labor of prison system. And lastly, it's the external and specialized medical assistance that both the slavery system was void of, and also the prison system. When I first went to prison, there were probably 4 or 5 psychiatrists that would be assigned to a particular unit. Due to budget cuts, individual psychiatrists was kind of taken out of the system, and what replaced those psychiatrists was the medications. And so you had the introduction of these psychotropic medications. You had the introduction of these depressive or sleep aid medications. And so individuals that potentially had just got 10, 15, 20 years, and you go to the infirmary because you want to talk to somebody about the situation that you've gotten yourself in to really deal with that situation. There's no one there. And the only thing that you can be given to is some type of medication that takes you mentally away from what you still have to physically deal with every day. These were some of the characteristics that I saw in alignment with the system of slavery that we still deal with today with our system of prison. And just like we needed major legislations, major individuals, organizations, and corporate institutions to come together and see the inhumane treatment of slavery, it's the same thing that needs to happen now when we consider the conditions of our prison system. Now, please note, I know Miles of Freedom advocates for any type of criminalistic behavior, but we do advocate for rehabilitation. We believe that if you are placed in an institution, i.e. the prison system, that there should be checks and balances within that institution to make sure that when you are let go or when you are released, that you do have a chance to be a better person, that you do have an opportunity to reconnect to those individuals that are able to allow you to reconnect back with them, and that you have dealt with some of the issues that sent you to prison. That's what prison reform should be about. When we look at what's next, we look at the legislation's needs. What do we need to look at in legislation? We need to begin to either lobby, advocate, or present legislations on state and federal levels. Keep in mind, when we are advocating, we have to make sure that we are doing this on the state and federal level. Advocate for better access to education. Advocate for pre-mental assistance so individuals can have mental assistance before they walk out of prison. Advocate for individuals to be paid. The average individual that was incarcerated because they didn't have a job. And then they're put in an institution where they work every day and they're never paid. Once they get out, yes, they want to be an entrepreneur because they've never been introduced to what true work equates to. If we can start paying individuals now, potentially when they get out, they'll have more in their pocket. Potentially when they get out, they would have been able to support the kids that they were taken away from. That family feels like that they are a resource and not an issue or a problem, and the door might be opened back even more. Connect to services for post-release. If you're listening to this call and you're wondering what else can you do outside of lobbying, outside of advocating and presenting legislation, find out what organizations are particularly working in the space of prison reform, and understand what your value is to that particular organization. You can donate your time. You can share a post. You can share their Facebook page. You can also donate financial resources. But know that you are a resource and you are valuable to an institution that's in the space of prison reform. And lastly, don't be afraid to challenge the mental constructs that have been formed or that you have formed in your mind about individuals that are experiencing the criminal legal system or that are experiencing our prison system. We have to understand that there are vast issues that push people or that persuade people to commit crimes. There are situations concerning communities, underdevelopment of communities, lack of support of communities that push people to commit crimes. And when you're placed in a system, that does nothing to assist you, to help you be a better person, and then you return back to the community that's been underserved, the hope is hard to find. It's not that the hope isn't there, but it's hard to find. And it's organizations like Miles of Freedom, it's individuals like each of you on this call, and the Dallas College community in general that can move forward to make sure that each one of us is doing our task to bridge the gap from prison to promise for somebody. I want to thank you for being attentive, and I pray that you have gotten something out of this presentation, and I will turn it back over to Ms. Faye Davis for any questions or remarks.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was absolutely fantastic. And we do have quite a few questions. Before we get into any of them, and I know you already touched on this, but I want to make sure that it's repeated. What the people in the audience, what can we do to assist you and your organization and, previously incarcerated individuals that need the help?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I will selfishly say, for Miles of Freedom, this is our 10th year. I have two younger daughters, and I have an organization that's 10 years old. And so this is a year of visibility for us. And so really helping us share our message, letting us get out there more. We've worked with about 1,600 men and women over the past 10 years, assisting them returning home from prison, about a 7% recidivism rate. We have a fresh produce distribution that's distributed about 1 million pounds of food to individuals experiencing food insecurity. If you want to volunteer, you can volunteer in our food distribution. Social media interns, we're always looking for some good social media people. Earlier, as I said, just get engaged in legislation processes.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So we've got some questions here. So the first question is, how can we help change the criminal justice system?
I think so. When you're looking at the criminal justice system, the first thing that I've learned to say is we have to understand what we're talking about. And so when you talk about the criminal justice system, that's everything from arrest to reentry. And so when you ask, how can we change the criminal justice system? That's a different conversation than how can we change the prison system? The prison system sits within the criminal justice system. If the question is how can we change the criminal justice system, we have to look at those particular areas that have gaps in the point of the arrest. What's going on with the arrest situations where individuals are not being arrested, they're being killed, where particularly in my case, where evidence was not turned over to the DA's office. What gaps in evidence? What happens during interrogation, right? How can jurors really understand that a lot of times you could have the wrong person in the seat? Those are the things and the questions that we have to start asking ourselves when we're talking about the criminal justice system. Not to look at it as a whole, but each department and what is their specific duties in each department, and how can we connect all together?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's actually when I read your story, that was the first thing that I was thinking. So in your case, where did you see it broken? Is the whole system broken? Because there were a lot of steps that you went through. It was the police officers, and then the people in the jail, the jury, the judge, and they all came to this wrong conclusion. Where was it broken?
Yeah, so if you look at my case, Ms. Faye, honestly, I think that's why my case is the first non-DNA, no confession. My case was overturned on prosecutorial misconduct, tainted identification, and faulty scientific evidence. I mean, that's the whole gamut of the process. In the beginning, there was evidence. And so just last year, the Richard Miles Act was passed. The Richard Miles Act was the only criminal justice bill that went through the 87th legislation. And this particular bill, this act, works with or addresses the processes that police officers should take when they are dealing with evidence to make sure that that evidence is turned over. Had the evidence been turned over in my case, it was a phone call in the police records way before I went to jury trial that told the police who did the shooting, that gave them the person's name, who they was with, what type of gun they used. And the police officer that took the phone call even referred to my case, but this was never turned over to testing. This was never turned in. Even before I was picked up, the description of the shooter was 6'2", 6'4", real dark complected. He didn't fit me. So you have implicit bias, you have systemic issues that go on, you have cognitive thinking, mental constructs. I think the whole process in my case shows errors where we can really be intentional at trying to make sure that people don't go through this process again. And lastly, I would say, Ms. Faye, is the jurors. I mean, while we as lay individuals can look at the arresting officers, can look at the detective and lawyer, I went to a jury trial and the jurors heard the same evidence. They still convicted me. They still gave me 60 years. And so I think just a understanding and a teaching of the importance of the criminal justice system should be done, and it should be priority.
Thank you. So we've got some questions concerning, entertainment media. So have you ever seen Netflix's 13th, When They See Us, or Just Mercy or The Hurricane? Have you seen any of those?
So I've met the Central Park Five. That's the When They See Us. Yes, I have read and watched Just Mercy. We did a talk on that. And the 13th, yes, I've seen that. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago.
Wonderful. Okay, so the question is, how accurate are those? And do they help? When people see those, does it really spread awareness?
They are very accurate. I mean, um, each one of those stories are very accurate. The 13th obviously lays this. It connects history and the present, and I think that's where we are as a nation. In order for us to create a better future, we have to connect history and the present to understand how we got here. It may hurt when you're looking at these past situations. It may not feel good when you're connecting with other parts of the fabric to make a whole fabric, but we cannot get to the future until we connect our past and our present. And so the 13th lays out a perfect dialogue of the past and the present. When They See Us, it shows you the challenges of wrongful conviction and post coming home. It's a challenge, every day, because the biggest thing about being wrongfully in prison is at some point you realize that all of the time that was taken was not your fault. And so there's a mental space of depression because I can't blame the 15 years on myself, but I know I lost the 15 years. The Just Mercy. I love Just Mercy. I'm trying to get Brian Stevens at a Miles of Freedom event, so I hope you hear this here. But Jamie Foxx, I mean, the movie was. I took my mom to see the movie, and my mom told me not to do it anymore because I didn't think about the impact of incarceration on my mom. My dad passed 6 months before I got out of prison, so I wasn't able to walk this side of the playing field with him. And when when my mom and I went to see Just Mercy, it just sent her back to this place that she thought she was healed from. And so all of those are very good movies and very good documentaries to digest.
Thank you. So we have quite a few people in IT joining us today, and so one of them asked, "Are there any foundations that they can reach out to focus on technological training and education to help bridge the digital technology divide for previously incarcerated individuals?" And it does Miles of Freedom have that need as well?
That's a good question. I think now is the time. Now is the time for things to connect because it's very timely when you consider where we are as a state and as a nation. I'll say particularly in South Dallas, in the space that we're working in, you have the Cardboard Project. They are a nonprofit organization. They do great work with that, connecting that digital divide. They work with not only individuals impacted by incarceration, but homeless to help them with phone setups and stuff like that. Oftentimes with Miles of Freedom, we try to partner with other organizations that do services that we don't actually do ourselves. For Miles of Freedom, I would say because we started as a grassroots organization and we have actually navigated this storm of the first 10 years, it's going to be very important for us to grow that social media and branding space that we feel like that we should and could be in. One of the things that often interests me is you've never seen a commercial about reentry. You've never seen consistent social media about somebody advertising about reentry services. Yet incarceration is one of, we leave the nation in incarceration, right? This is a problem that we've dealt with really since pre-Civil War. And so I think that really new innovative ways, thoughts, and processes needs to be pushed to the forefront so that people incarcerated will know that, man, you got some people out here that's really trying to welcome you back in. Yes, you was wrong for whatever you did, but you've served your time. Yes, we've given you some rehabilitative resources, and now let's welcome you back home so you can be a sustainable, productive citizen in society.
Thank you. Shelley wanted you to know that to thank you for leading the way for her to better understand. And she's wondering if there are any online educational opportunities and while people are incarcerated, and what additional resources are needed.
So that's a great question right there. And once again, we look at the difference in the way states work with, or for lack of better words, handle individuals incarcerated. So for the southern states, the ones that I mentioned earlier, and I can only really speak about Texas because that's the only state system that I was locked up in. I was in Baltimore this past weekend talking to my friend, and their state prison system is set up totally different. I mean, they get paid, they get intimate visits with their wife. Texas, we're just so far behind. I mean, even from a technological standpoint, you can't use the internet while you're incarcerated, in which I think that's a major downfall. I understand the security. I understand the security of it, but when you get out and every job that you got to apply for is done by the internet and you've never even turned on Google, or the only thing you know about Yahoo is some milk, I mean, you out of there, right? And so I think that there needs to be a push on making sure individuals can get this access to technology while they are incarcerated. It's going to be a big fight. I mean, I kid you not, because a lot of the times the prison system moves out of safety first. safety first is always the primary reason for budget, because obviously people that are incarcerated, they feel the most important thing is to keep them safe. And beyond safe is then, probably medical and then education and so forth, right? Well, not taking safety off as a priority, but putting other things just as important as safety when they're making decisions. Reintegration equating to safety, I think, is important. And I hope I just answered that question.
Yes, and just to clarify, to this day, in Texas, inmates are not allowed to use the internet. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that is, you cannot use internet. One of my first college classes, I took AutoCAD, and this was release 12. So AutoCAD is drafting. And drafting was the closest to computer use. You might be able to take up business, I think it was business science, which kind of talked about what is Word, what is Excel, and so forth. But really navigating and understanding the internet, it's not accessible, not in Texas.
Thank you. I don't think that's something, I know that's something I didn't know. So thank you for answering that. And Curtis is asking a question I think we're all wondering. So what have you done to heal from this traumatic experience? And I know, and can you please add in there, how are you not bitter? And where does your positivity come from?
Wow. So those are the $5 million questions right there. So I think the first question was, how did I heal? Is that the first question, Ms. Payne?
Yes. How did you heal?
And I think Curtis, you said Curtis asked a question. Curtis, I'm going to say, I think it's some rapper or somebody say, I walk with a limp. Meaning I don't think I will ever be able to heal. I think what helps me is opportunities like this, because I'm able to talk about my experience, whether I'm talking to a group of professors or lawyers or police officers. Every time that I talk about my experience, it kind of gives me this positive way of venting. And I think that helps me from keeping a lot of that pressure on the inside. And so I think that's how I'm able to maintain, right? Heal, I think there's always going to be that wound that's going to limit me, that's going to let me know that I am handicapped and not as sufficient in many areas. How have I remained positive? The first thing I'll say is the biggest thing going in prison, staying in prison, and coming out of prison has been my spirituality. I grew up. My dad started preaching at a very early age, and church was just really our biggest thing outside of education and family. And we grew up in a very just spiritually guided household. It didn't matter the denomination, just as long as you were actually in church and went by particular guidelines. That was very important for me because when I went to prison, I had often heard and read about the story of Joseph in Sunday school, which was about a biblical individual that was incarcerated for something that they didn't do. And they received favor in this institution, and everything that they did within the institution was beneficial for this nation post Joseph's release. And so I saw myself in the story of Joseph, and I challenged, one night I asked myself, well, speaking to God intently, I'm like, man, if you're real, I'm in the Joseph situation. I want you and I need you to manifest yourself. And so that particular request was handed up, and I just began to walk by faith. outside of my spirituality, my family structure and network, I was blessed that my mom and dad was with me, sisters and brothers, and that there was other innocent people on Cofield. I mean, the first guy I met was Benjamin Spencer. Benjamin Spencer was just released last year after doing 34 years for a crime that he didn't commit. The first guy that helped me write my writ of habeas corpus back to the courts was a guy named Ricky Wyatt that did 32 years for a crime that he didn't commit. My best friend's Christopher Scott did 12 years for a crime that he didn't commit. So seeing all of these men on one unit, and Texas has over 100 prisons, it showed me that it was a bigger problem, and I had to understand that if I didn't cause the problem, then that meant that I was placed in it to be a solution to the
Wow, wow. Well, you are absolutely amazing, Richard. We have time for just a few more questions. But Richard, another question. Lori is wanting to know, was there any action taken against the officers that arrested you?
So no officers were taken against no actions was taken against the officers that arrested me, nor the detective. When I was fully exonerated in 2012, I did file with the Bar Association against my prosecutor. And I filed on my prosecutor not only because of my case, but I found that there were other cases that this gentleman had prosecuted, and they were exonerated. And that gave me a pattern. And I don't know if, I'm not saying that it was intentional. I'm not saying it wasn't intentional. I'm saying that I felt that my responsibility at that point in time was to at least file with the Bar Association. We did that. The bar did agree that there were prosecutorial acts that was done that was, unconstitutional or whatever, but it didn't go from there. The gentleman got an attorney, and I never heard anything else about it. So I'm assuming that the Bar Association, because this was years ago, I just pretty much dropped my complaint. True story, last year, Ms. Faye, October 2nd. So keep this in mind, October 2nd is National Wrongful Conviction Day. It's national, and it's a day that we should acknowledge wrongful convictions within our nation. And so this past year, because I had accepted the friend request from my prosecutor, he friend requested me about 2 years ago. I accepted his friend request last year. I kind of put it out on Facebook because I knew he would see it, that I would open an opportunity for a conversation. And so since then, I've talked to the gentleman that prosecuted me 3 times, and we're actually going to host a conversation next month at it's the form, it used to be the Belo Mansion. They renamed it. I think it's the Mansion of the Art District or something. But we're going to have, first time ever, this conversation with the person that was wrongfully incarcerated and the prosecutor or the former prosecutor.
Oh, okay. And you, just to clarify, you said that date was October 2nd, correct?
Yes, October 2nd is National.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So we do have more questions, but let's just, we'll get to one more. And then anyone else that does have a question for Richard Miles, do you mind sharing your email, or how can people contact you?
Richard Miles, and that's RICHARD MILES MOF, acronym for Miles of Freedom, at gmail.com. You can also give me a ring at 214-290-2337. That's the Miles of Freedom number. And our website is www.milesoffreedom.org.
Thank you. And those three ways to contact Richard is in the chat. So please write those down before we close out the event. So let's get to our last question, and it is from Sheila. And I think you touched on this a little, but it has been established that the privatization of the prison system is the issue. It's about profit, not rehabilitation. Until this is changed, until your story is the norm, I'm curious if you are aware of any legislation of progress being made to go against the privatization of prisons.
So that's a good question as well. I'm not aware of any legislations being made, but what I will let people know, and I posted it on my Facebook last year. Our Governor Abbott signed into law a bill that would allocate $250 million from the Texas Department of Justice, Texas Department of Criminal Justice Institution, to go towards the assistance of building the wall. Regardless of where you stand on that particular topic or subject, here we have an institution, the prison system, that's been challenged with dealing with for-profit prisons to help the population and so forth, and saying that they don't have enough money for central heating and air and all of these dynamics, but yet and still we can take $250 million and allocate it for another spending. Is just beyond me. I think the ramifications of that bill is not yet to be seen, because there is going to be a massive reduction in services. There's going to be a massive cutoff to compensate for that $250 million budget cut. So I'm not sure of any legislation that would deal with private prisons, but I do think that the state prisons is in for a challenge moving forward dealing with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. This has been just a fabulous presentation, and this was recorded, so anybody that didn't get a chance to see it will be able to on our website and YouTube channel. And Richard, again, thank you so much. This was just amazing, and thank you to our audience for joining us.